It started with a stalled truck on a dusty back road in Georgia, but what followed was a nightmare no one saw coming. Dressed in a crisp navy suit, Elijah Brooks, Georgia's first black governor, was mistaken for a car thief, violently arrested by a white officer with a grudge and a gun. But this wasn't just a case of mistaken identity. It was the beginning of a brutal conspiracy, stretching from a backwoods jail to a courthouse run by a segregationist judge. Beaten, framed, and locked away, Elijah scratched a desperate message into a prison wall, only for a janitor with a hidden past to become his lifeline. And just when rescue seemed certain, a sniper's bullet left him paralyzed. What connects his long-lost mother, a crooked cop's family secret, and a militia's fiery ambush? The truth will shock you. Stay until the end to uncover how one man's courage sparks a war for justice. Like, comment, and subscribe to follow stories that speak truth to power. The Georgia sun was unforgiving that afternoon as Governor Elijah Brooks stood beside his stalled pickup truck on Old Mill Road, miles from the nearest town. Dust clung to his navy suit, sweat beaded along his brow, but he remained calm. He'd called a tow truck and was waiting, unaware that his dignity, and safety, were about to be stolen. When a county patrol cruiser screeched to a halt behind him, Elijah expected a standard welfare check. Instead, Officer Travis Caldwell, a lean white man with a buzzcut and twitching fingers, jumped out with his gun drawn. Hands up. Step away from the vehicle, he barked, his tone not of concern, but of suspicion. Elijah raised his hands slowly, his deep voice steady. This is my truck, officer. I'm the governor of Georgia. But Travis didn't want truth. He wanted control. Ain't no governor looking like you, the officer spat, glaring at Elijah's dark skin and polished shoes as if they were weapons. You people don't drive trucks like this unless they're stolen. Right then, Elijah knew, this wasn't about the truck, it was about him. His skin, his suit, his position. His very presence on that road offended Travis. He was guilty not of theft, but of being a black man in a place where some still clung to Jim Crow in spirit, if not in law. The situation escalated with frightening speed. Travis slammed Elijah face first into the truck's hot metal door. Cuffs clicked tightly around his wrists. Blood trickled down his fingers as Travis sneered, bet you thought that suit made you untouchable. Elijah stayed silent. Not out of fear, but because he knew too well how quickly the system could twist words into weapons. This was not his first encounter with bias, but never had it been so raw, so violent, so public. Elijah had built a life on poise and progress, rising from Atlanta's housing projects to the state's highest office. But here, on this dirt road, all of that vanished in the eyes of one hateful man with a badge. And when backup arrived, two more white officers who laughed at the sight of a bloodied black man in handcuffs, Elijah's heart sank deeper. His ID was mocked, his name dismissed. Fake, they said, before stomping on his wallet, grinding his official card into the dirt. It wasn't just Travis. It was the system. One where skin color was guilt, and authority was a shield for cruelty. As they dragged him toward the patrol car, Elijah's mind burned not with fear, but with resolve. This wasn't just about his freedom, it was about exposing a culture of bias too long protected by silence. Underscore 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 underscore. Pair this with the Agioithio, and it forms a seamless opening chapter for your video series. Would you like me to continue with A2, focusing on abuse inside the precinct and the corrupt judge, while keeping the theme of systemic injustice front and center? The patrol car's interior was stifling as Officer Travis Caldwell slammed the door behind Elijah Brooks, the governor of Georgia, now handcuffed and bleeding in the back seat like a common criminal. The seat reeked of mildew and sweat. Outside, the other officers laughed as they crushed his ID under a boot, erasing not just his identity but the truth. As the car rumbled toward the Redstone County precinct, Elijah stared out the window, watching the cotton fields blur by, land once worked by slaves, now patrolled by men who hadn't left that mindset behind. At the precinct, the humiliation escalated. Elijah was dragged through double doors, past officers who barely glanced his way. No one questioned why a well-dressed black man was in shackles. They just smirked and moved aside. At the booking desk stood Sergeant Polk, a thick-set man with a gut hanging over his belt and a face as hard as brick. Travis grinned as he shoved Elijah forward. "Got us a real troublemaker, Sarge. Assaulted an officer, stole a truck, resisted arrest. Claims he's the governor." Polk didn't blink. He just muttered, "That's so," before scribbling something on a clipboard and waving Elijah toward the fingerprint station. Elijah spoke up, voice hoarse but unwavering. "That's a lie. I am Governor Elijah Brooks. Check the state database. I've done nothing wrong." Polk didn't even look at him. "Sure you are. And I'm the Pope." His words were dripping with sarcasm, but his eyes were filled with something deeper, contempt. Not for Elijah's defiance, but for his existence. The idea of a black man in power disgusted him. Two officers yanked Elijah's arms forward, pressing his bruised hands into an ink pad with unnecessary force. One muttered, "Slippery fingers," while twisting Elijah's wrist until something popped. Pain shot up his arm, but Elijah gritted his teeth. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a scream. The humiliation wasn't just physical, it was systemic. His right to a phone call. Denied. His demand to see legal counsel. Laughed off. Then came the cruelest blow. "You'll be in front of Judge Ramsey tomorrow," Travis whispered with a smirk. "He's old school. Can't stand your kind. You'll fit right in behind bars." Elijah had heard of Ramsey, rumors of a judge who prided himself on cleaning the streets by over-sentencing black men. Some called him a relic. Others, a menace. Now, Elijah was in his courtroom's crosshairs. As they tossed him into a holding cell, the door clanged shut behind him like a steel drum of finality. The walls were damp, the cot rusted. His suit, once tailored for meetings with senators, was now stained with blood and dirt. Alone in the dark, Elijah didn't just feel like a prisoner. He felt like a symbol of how far racism could reach, even in 21st century America. A black governor, stripped of dignity, truth, and protection. Not because he broke the law, but because he represented change. The cell was cold and damp, with peeling paint and the faint smell of bleach clinging to the concrete walls. Governor Elijah Brooks sat hunched on the rusted cot, his once crisp navy suit now torn, smeared with dirt, sweat, and dried blood. Every breath was a sharp reminder of bruised ribs. But worse than the physical pain was the weight of humiliation, the knowledge that his skin color had erased his title and dignity in the eyes of those sworn to uphold the law. Outside his cell, the sounds of the Redstone County Jail echoed faintly, keys jangling, boots thudding, low laughter from guards who knew the game was rigged. Elijah clenched his jaw. He couldn't let this system win. But in a place built to strip a man of hope, how could he fight? Then he saw it, a crack in the wall where concrete met the rusted steel frame. Not wide enough to escape, but enough to act. Using a chipped edge from the metal bed frame, Elijah scraped slowly, silently, until the concrete gave way. He pressed the fragment into his palm and began etching words into the wall. Governor Elijah Brooks. Framed. Officer Travis Caldwell. Attacked on Old Mill Road. Please help. Each stroke was a plea, not just for himself, but for every person this jail had buried in silence. The message was rough, uneven, but legible. A lifeline scratched in concrete. Hours passed in darkness until a soft sound broke the stillness, the low shuffle of a mop across the floor. A frail woman entered the hallway, pushing a bucket. Her gray uniform hung loose on her petite frame, her silver hair tucked beneath a cap. It was Miss Ella, the janitor. She moved slowly, as if invisible, her eyes scanning the cell without a word. Elijah stood, pressing his face to the bars. "Ma'am," he whispered, hoarse. "Please. Look at the wall." She paused. Her eyes narrowed behind thick glasses. As she moved closer and read the message, recognition lit her weathered face. "I know you," she whispered. "You're Elijah Brooks. You have to get that message out," he said. "They're going to bury me in here." Miss Ella hesitated for only a moment before nodding. "I used to clean the governor's mansion. Years ago. I remember when you were first elected. I was proud." She pulled a rag from her pocket and slowly wiped the wall, careful not to smudge the message, memorizing every word. Then, without another glance, she slipped away, silent as she came. Elijah's heart pounded. In a place ruled by fear and cruelty, someone had seen him. Someone believed him. And more than that, someone cared enough to act. In that moment, he realized something powerful. Even in the darkest corners of America's broken justice system, light could seep through the cracks, not from power or position, but from ordinary people refusing to look away. And sometimes, the quiet ones, the janitors, the bystanders, were the ones who saved lives. The message worked. Less than 24 hours after Miss Ella vanished down that dim corridor, the jail erupted in chaos. State troopers, summoned by a whistleblower tip connected to Miss Ella's friend in law enforcement, stormed Redstone County Jail with warrants and body cams. Their boots echoed like thunder through the precinct as startled officers backed away, unsure how their silent fortress had been breached. Governor Elijah Brooks, still in his tattered suit and orange jumpsuit, was yanked from solitary, wrists raw from shackles but eyes steady. The troopers unchained him, explaining the truth had made it to the Capitol. Cameras were waiting. Reporters too. The public now knew the governor hadn't vanished, he'd been buried. But freedom, Elijah would learn, was fragile. As the troopers escorted him toward a black SUV to take him to a safe house outside of town, the jail's front doors slammed open. Travis Caldwell, no longer in uniform but wearing a trucker cap and oil-stained jeans, stormed in like a man possessed. Before anyone could react, he slipped something into Elijah's jumpsuit pocket, a small plastic bag. "He's got drugs!" Travis screamed, pointing at the governor. "Check him. He's a dealer." The troopers froze. One reached in and retrieved the bag. White powder. Elijah's face tightened. "He planted it," he said through clenched teeth. Travis stepped back, smug. "Prove it, Governor." It was a setup, plain and dirty. The same racism that once justified a beating was now trying to paint Elijah as a criminal again, this time with drugs. The room went still as tension surged. But before the troopers could act, a call came through. It was Sheriff Tate, an older lawman from the neighboring county, no relation to the reporter Tate, who'd reviewed the jail footage. "That bag was planted," he confirmed over speakerphone. "Janitor's statement lines up. This man's been framed since day one." The troopers released Elijah's arm. Cameras flashed outside. Reporters shouted questions. A voice called out, "Governor Brooks, what happened?" Blood still crusted his lip. His hands shook. But Elijah stood tall. "I was arrested for breaking down in the wrong place, with the wrong skin," he said. "Beaten, framed, and silenced. But truth doesn't stay buried." For a moment, it felt like justice had found a foothold. But Travis wasn't done. That night, as Elijah was being transported to the safe house deep in the Georgia woods, a pickup truck slammed into the trooper's vehicle. The car spun out, tires screeching as metal crumpled. Elijah's head slammed against the window, pain blooming across his temple. Through the haze, he heard Travis's voice, roaring from the other truck, "You'll pay, Governor." The crash wasn't random, it was a message. Even without a badge, Travis still held power. Not because of the law, but because of a system that had enabled him for years, a system that didn't fear accountability, because it had never had to. And now, that system wasn't just trying to silence Elijah. It was trying to destroy him. Underscore 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 underscore. Let me know if you'd like to continue with A5, where Elijah awakens in the hospital, paralyzed but more determined than ever. The world returned in a blur of beeping machines and fluorescent light. Governor Elijah Brooks opened his eyes to a hospital ceiling, his body stiff and heavy. The IVs in his arm pulsed rhythmically. His shoulder burned, and a dull numbness crept from his waist down. He tried to move his legs. Nothing. A doctor stood at his bedside, her expression somber but composed. "Governor Brooks," she said gently, "the bullet from the ambush damaged your spinal cord. You're paralyzed from the waist down. But you're alive, and stable." Elijah closed his eyes. The words didn't sink in all at once. Alive, but broken. Free, but wounded. He had survived the crash, the sniper, the jail, the beatings. But now he faced the harsh reality that his fight would continue from a wheelchair. Aides buzzed in and out of the room, some near tears, others scribbling notes and updates. A few referred to him as a symbol now, a civil rights icon in real time, one whispered. But Elijah didn't feel like a symbol. He felt like a man robbed, of peace, of movement, of the illusion that power could shield a black body from prejudice. The television flickered in the corner of the room. Footage rolled of Travis Caldwell in handcuffs, being loaded into a van. But even behind bars, Travis wore a smile. The newscaster's voice was clipped, tense. "Former officer Travis Caldwell has vowed a white revolution. Demonstrations supporting him are growing across the state." Elijah's jaw tightened. It wasn't over. Not even close. Then the door creaked open. Miss Ella stepped in quietly, her janitor's uniform gone, replaced by a modest gray cardigan. Her silver hair fell loose around her shoulders. She approached the bed slowly, tears in her eyes. "I got your message out," she whispered. "They heard you." Elijah blinked, unsure of what she meant. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder, old, brittle papers, court documents, photos. "You need to see this," she said. Inside were records tracing back decades. Travis Caldwell's father had once served on the same county commission as Judge Ramsey. There were letters, handwritten notes, and sealed reports, proof of a conspiracy. Redstone County's justice system had been rigged for generations. Black men disproportionately charged. Complaints buried. And Travis? He was a product of that legacy, raised in it, protected by it. Elijah stared at the pages, his hands trembling. "Where did you get this?" Miss Ella's voice cracked. "Because I was part of it, once. I worked in their buildings. I cleaned their offices. I listened, but I stayed quiet. Until I saw your name on that wall." She paused, then added softly, "I'm your mother, Elijah." The room went silent. Tears filled Elijah's eyes, not just from the revelation, but from the weight of all he'd endured to reach this moment. In one breath, he gained the weapon to fight back, and the family he never knew he had. And now, with the truth in his hands, he wouldn't just defend himself. He would burn the whole corrupt machine to the ground. Underscore 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 Would you like to continue with A6, where Elijah takes legal action while Travis escapes and chaos reignites across the state? The following days were a storm of headlines, legal filings, and federal attention. From his hospital bed, Governor Elijah Brooks began building a case, not just to clear his name, but to expose the entire chain of corruption rooted deep in Redstone County. Miss Ella's folder was a time bomb. It included forged arrest records, backdoor communications between Judge Ramsey and the Caldwell family, and internal memos that revealed decades of coordinated racial profiling. Elijah's legal team, now joined by state investigators and civil rights attorneys, moved quickly to launch a formal inquiry. Every page in that file told the same story. For years, black men had been hunted, not protected, by the justice system in that county. And Elijah's case, high profile as it was, wasn't an exception, it was just the one they couldn't cover up. With the evidence laid bare, Judge Ramsey was suspended pending a federal investigation. Public outrage erupted. Rallies swept across Atlanta, Savannah, and Augusta. Civil rights groups demanded sweeping reform. For many, Elijah's story was a painful reminder of how little had changed, and how much further the nation had to go. But just as the momentum shifted toward justice, the unthinkable happened. Travis Caldwell escaped federal custody. During a low-security medical transport in the early hours of the morning, he vanished. 2 guards were found bound in a ditch outside Macon. Their weapons gone. Their vehicle torched. The news hit Elijah like a freight train. Lying in bed, his legs numb and his shoulder still in recovery, he watched the footage in silence. Surveillance showed a group of masked men, likely local militia sympathizers, breaking Travis out. His face flashed across the screen. Same twisted smile. Same burning hatred. "He's planning something," Elijah murmured to his aide. "He didn't escape just to run. He escaped to finish what he started." And he was right. Across Georgia, a fringe group calling itself the Redstone Reclaimers began to surface, posting online videos defending Travis and claiming the state was being taken over. They rallied behind Confederate flags and dog whistle slogans, calling Elijah a fraud, a threat to real Georgia. The FBI and Georgia Bureau of Investigation immediately assigned protective detail to the governor, but Elijah knew this wasn't just about safety anymore. It was a battle for the soul of the state. He met with lawmakers from his hospital bed, signed emergency orders to investigate police departments statewide, and addressed the public live, his first televised speech since the shooting. Wearing a gray button-down shirt, his body propped in a wheelchair, Elijah looked straight into the camera. "Justice doesn't wear a uniform," he said. "It wears truth. I may never walk again, but I will stand, every single day, against hate." The room erupted in applause, but behind the curtain, aides whispered updates. A militia rally was forming near Redstone County. Travis had not been seen, but rumors swirled. Elijah's body might have been broken, but the war was still burning. And he was ready to face it, again. Underscore 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 underscore. Would you like to move forward with A7, the final chapter in this arc, where Elijah faces one last showdown with Travis in the woods? The Georgia pine woods stood quiet in the early hours, a blanket of mist clinging low to the ground. But that silence was deceiving. Somewhere among those trees, Travis Caldwell was waiting. For weeks, law enforcement had tracked whispers of a final gathering. Redstone County locals, many of them hardened militia members, were preparing for what they called a reckoning. Intelligence placed Travis in the woods, leading a last stand. Governor Elijah Brooks, against the advice of his security team, insisted on being there. Strapped into his reinforced wheelchair, his shoulder still healing and his legs paralyzed, Elijah stared out at the forest line from the staging area, surrounded by state troopers. But this wasn't about ego. It was about showing the people, all people, that hate wouldn't chase him into hiding. "I need to face him," he told Sheriff Tate. "This doesn't end until the country sees what racism looks like when it's unmasked." The team pushed cautiously into the woods. Troopers flanked him, radios crackling. Smoke curled up from a campfire ahead. And there he was. Travis. Dirty, ragged, and still burning with that same hate, he stood in the center of a clearing, shotgun in hand, surrounded by a dozen armed men. When he saw Elijah's chair roll into view, he laughed, cold and sharp. "Well, well. Look who's crawling back." Elijah didn't flinch. "You ran. I stood." "You didn't stand," Travis sneered. "You begged." "No," Elijah said calmly. "I exposed you." Tension split the air like lightning. But behind Elijah, Sheriff Tate and his deputies stepped forward, their rifles raised. "This ends now," the sheriff growled. But Travis lifted his shotgun, finger tightening on the trigger, until a sudden crack rang out. One of his own men, a young recruit named Denny, lowered his rifle, tears in his eyes. "This ain't right," Denny said. "He didn't do nothing to us. You just hate that he's the governor." Travis turned, furious. "Traitor." Before he could raise his weapon again, the rest of the militia scattered. Sirens howled in the distance. Helicopters circled overhead. In seconds, Travis was on the ground, swarmed by troopers. His weapon gone. His voice still spitting poison, but powerless. And Elijah? He sat in silence. Not triumphant. Not angry. Just resolute. Later that night, back in the Capitol, Elijah addressed the nation from his wheelchair. "This fight was never about me," he said. "It was about whether we still believe in liberty and justice, for all. Racism didn't start with Travis Caldwell, and it won't end with him. But we are one step closer." The room erupted in applause. Reporters wept. Veterans stood. Black and white Georgians embraced in the crowd. And behind the cameras, Miss Ella, his mother, wiped a tear from her cheek. Her son had not just survived, he had made history. Because true power wasn't in the badge, or the bench, or the bullet. It was in the courage to stand, even when you can't walk. Governor Elijah Brooks' story reminds us that true strength isn't measured by titles, badges, or even the ability to walk. It's measured by the courage to stand for what's right, especially when the world tries to silence you. Racism may hide behind uniforms and old systems, but it loses its grip the moment everyday people choose to speak up, like Miss Ella, like young Denny. Justice doesn't happen all at once, it's built, step by step, by those who refuse to back down. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of something you've witnessed or felt, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your voice. And if you're someone who believes in the power of stories to spark change, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We're telling the stories that others won't, and we're doing it together.